like we said, we've covered this a little bit before. We went way more into depth on it at USF. We'll kind of meet in the middle here and do like a somewhat understanding of it. This will make more sense of the movement screen, which is your final project. So the more you understand this, the easier your final project will be. Okay? So developmental sequence is kind of our, when we're born, we have nothing but reflexes. So everything, so if you touch a baby's face, they'll turn its head to the side. If they grab your finger and squeeze tight, that's a reflex. If you scrape the bottom of their foot, they'll pull in. Those are all reflexes. They seem really cute, like when they do that, but it's a subconscious reaction, and it's all survival. So it's all protective. Those reflexes, some stay and some fade over time as we voluntarily control our movement. But in general, we're born with, we can't do anything, right? If you lay a baby face down, you don't want to do that, obviously. They can roll over, bad things can happen. They can't control any of their own movement. So every single one of you have ever developed was from starting with scratch. You had nothing. You had to develop every single movement that you had. So that's why in the movement screen or in the developmental sequence, we assume that you could already do it. You spent 9 months to the first 2 years, 3 years of your life working at every single hour of every single day being able to do those things. So the fact that if I can't get neck extension and I spent so much time learning it, I've lost that. I had it at some point. Okay? And each one is foundational for the next one. So the first thing, like I said, we can't do anything. So if we lay us face up, we're face up. If we lay us face down, we're face down. It's my brother's. He sent them to me.
Did you make the baby do this?
No, they're his pictures. So from this position, the first joint that develops is really our control of our head and our neck. So our head range of motion, our head is about 25 to 30% of our body weight at this age. So that's a huge, imagine our head now is about 8 to 10% of our body weight. So imagine triple our body weight in just our head, how much harder that would be to move around. So we really have to learn to get a strong neck initially. And the reason we need a strong neck is that everything that we want to pick up from our eyes or from our ears is from, so anytime we want to see anything or feel anything or move, that's through our eyes. So if we want to hear something or look, we have to look up and reach and look for it. All of our input is through our eyes and our ears. And to get that, we have to be able to move our head. So if we're laying on our back, we have to be able to flex our head up. If we're laying on our stomach, we have to be able to extend our head back and move around. So the first weight-bearing joint in the body is the shoulder joint. So being able to press up or just rest on our shoulders is directly related to being able to move our head. So the more stable and controlled we are in our shoulders, the more motion we have able to move our head, right? So before, when we did our thoracic spine, if we were stuck in kyphosis, you guys remember kyphosis, where we can't extend? So a baby has to be able to extend up to be able to look up. So we all could at one point extend. Developing kyphosis and different things is a loss of this spinal curve over time. And then because of that, we lose a lot of function in our neck, and all of those directly relate into our core function and our brain function. So how we think, how well we respond to stress, all of those things are dependent upon how well we are able to input stuff through our neck and react with our body. So one of the worst models, I think, in learning is sitting. Because we develop, all of our senses are tied to movement. So we learned to move by learning to move. So everything we ever wanted to do or reach, we physically did, and that was directly tied to the neural pathways in our brain. So then, as you grow older, you just sit longer. So you're expected to use one of your input systems when you have 5 that are meant to be able to absorb movement. So it's part of the reason why we try to do so much stuff hands-on is that you will learn and retain that the way you actually learn and retain stuff. The classroom setting is more of just a last few hundred years thing. It's not really a developmental thing. Okay? So once we can control and move our head through our neck, from that point, we try to learn to roll over. So once our rollover comes through our head and our eyes, in our eyes, the vestibular system activates our core. So the better our head can work and control, the easier our core and our reflexes kick in. And vice versa. So when we have a neck problem, we kind of, remember I had a stiff neck, we kind of move our whole body in one piece versus just our neck. So we start to lose some of our core function. So if you see people who sit at a desk all day long and their neck stiffens up, and then their reactive core gets worse, then their back gets worse, or then their thoracic spine gets worse. So everything is just kind of build from one correct way, and it falls apart that way too. Okay? Once we learn to roll over, around 4 months, give or take a few months, that is when our hemispheres, our right and left hemisphere, connect or cross over. Originally, we have a left hemisphere, which means our left side of our brain connects to our whole left side of our body, and our right side to our right side only. When we learn to cross midline, cross the middle center of our body with our arm or any part of our body, that for some magical reason in neuroscience it makes sense. It connects our left and our right side of our brain together. So at that point we can learn, our learning speed and our learning rate in movement and in just learning in general doubles. So we get exponentially quicker at learning things when we can cross midline. Okay? Then, once we are able to roll over enough times, the rocking position is kind of we're getting our, so we already did our hips back in our socket. This is getting our shoulders back in our socket. So our hips and our shoulders are similar in this position. And when the shoulder can get back in the socket, then we usually have full range of motion. If, just like our hip, it's slightly forward in that socket, it will pinch or click or do all those things. And then if our thoracic spine is off, and then our shoulder gets off, then it can go anywhere. It can go up into our neck, it can go down to our elbow or to our wrist. All of those things can kind of trickle on. So that's why rocking and crawling are so important in the first time and important still to kind of, it's the most natural way to tie our core to our hips and shoulders and to give our neck that freedom. So if you go into certain workshops like original strength or DNS, they'll spend hours initially just working on neck range of motion in the developmental sequence positions. And almost everyone's squat gets better and all their ranges of motion get better and their back pain goes away first just from getting the neck to work. That's interesting. Remember that when you go through college and after and you sit and that thing's starting to stiffen up. It's all kind of from the inside out. And then obviously from that point, all of our transitional positions, from that point our neck and our shoulders kind of tie to our whole body and how we work. Okay? And then eventually we walk, which makes sense. Any questions about the developmental sequence? This is the layer, this is how the movement screen works too, right? So when we haven't got to it yet, but when we do, we're going to look at different movements, and they are sort of how our reactive core is working with our body, and those movement screens will explain and make sense. So we're going to do that when we come back from spring break. So we're going to finish this week.